Jessica Hale adjusted her headset, the familiar hum of the cockpit filling her ears. To the passengers on Flight 482 from Denver to Chicago, she was the picture of calm professionalism, a commercial pilot who knew her route like the back of her hand. Children were watching movies on tiny screens, business travelers were tapping away on laptops, and a few elderly passengers were quietly reading newspapers. Jessica's co-pilot, a cheerful man named Tom, was chatting about the weather and a football game last night, completely unaware that Jessica's mind was somewhere else entirely. Her eyes flicked to the radar, casually scanning for any unusual blips. Most days it was routine, nothing ever happened above these skis. But today, a faint anomaly caught her attention. A small aircraft, moving fast and erratically, had appeared on the edge of restricted airspace. Jessica frowned. Military exercises were scheduled nearby, but this blip was different. It didn't match the official flight paths or exercise coordinates. Her instincts, finely tuned from years she'd left behind in the Air Force, sent a shiver down her spine. She ran subtle calculations in her head without anyone noticing: altitude, speed, wind shear, trajectory. Her fingers hovered over the controls, ready to act instantly if needed. Tom noticed the brief pause and glanced at her. "Everything okay?" he asked. Jessica smiled faintly. "Just scanning, nothing to worry about." He nodded, satisfied, and returned to his coffee. Outside, fluffy clouds drifted by, painting a serene picture, completely masking the tension building in the cockpit. Her passengers were blissfully unaware that she wasn't just a commercial pilot. In another life, Jessica had been known as Ghost Rider, one of the most skilled fighter pilots in U.S. Air Force history. She had executed missions deemed impossible, flying into hostile airspace with precision that physics and human reaction times. Those days were behind her, or so everyone believed. Now, in her civilian guise, she was just Jessica Hale, delivering people safely from point A to point B. But the radar didn't lie. The intruder aircraft was moving closer, ignoring warnings from air traffic control. Jessica's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. She flipped a switch to get a closer look, her eyes scanning every instrument. The intruder's trajectory was dangerous, and if uncorrected, it could breach restricted airspace over the city. Her training kicked in automatically, decades of muscle memory taking over as she assessed risk, calculated evasive maneuvers, and mentally prepared for action. "Altitude check," she said casually, as if verifying routine data. Tom, unaware that she was preparing for a possible interception. "Wind at 30,000 feet, 15 knots from the west. Trajectory unusual." Her voice remained calm, professional, even friendly, masking the storm of calculations and instincts she was running silently. The passengers continued their activities, reading, typing, chatting, unaware that the safety of the entire flight might soon depend on the expertise of the pilot they thought was ordinary. Jessica tapped her headset, listening carefully to ATC updates. The military jets had not yet scrambled, but she knew they would. She considered her options, plotting the safest path for her passengers while keeping the intruder in sight. Every maneuver had to be subtle, invisible to the passengers, yet precise enough to prevent any escalation. One wrong calculation could trigger a disaster, but Jessica's confidence was unwavering. Her years as Ghost Rider had prepared her for this. She could handle situations most pilots only read about in classified files. As the plane cruised above the Rockies, sunlight gleaming off the wings, Jessica took a deep breath. The ordinary flight she had expected had already begun to unravel. What the passengers saw was a smooth, uneventful journey. What she knew was that above the clouds, the calm facade hid a storm of danger and calculation. And somewhere out there, the intruder aircraft was closing in, setting the stage for an encounter no one could have anticipated. Jessica Hale, the seemingly ordinary commercial pilot, was about to remind the world that legends don't always wear uniforms. They sometimes wear smiles and headsets. The warning blip on Jessica's radar was growing larger, moving faster than any ordinary civilian aircraft. Her eyes narrowed as she tracked the intruder's trajectory. It was no routine pilot error. Something about the speed and the angles screamed trained precision. Her instincts, long dormant in her civilian life, flickered back to life. Every fiber of her being recognized patterns, splits in milliseconds, and potential threats long before anyone else could. "Tom," she said calmly, "we might have a situation developing here. Stay alert but don't alarm the passengers." Tom nodded, following her instructions, trusting her judgment, but he could feel tension creeping into the cockpit like an invisible fog. The intruder had crossed into restricted airspace, heading straight toward the flight path. Jessica adjusted the yoke slightly, making micro-adjustments invisible to the passengers. To them, it felt like a normal shift of the plane, a gentle wobble. Outside, the horizon was streaked with the contrails of two F-22 Raptors scrambling from a nearby base. Jessica's lips tightened into a thin line. Military jets didn't usually respond to civilian airspace breaches this quickly unless the situation was serious. She keyed her headset, sending a polite, professional message to ATC. "Flight 482 reporting unusual traffic at our 12 o'clock, high speed, unresponsive to advisories. Maintaining course while monitoring. Please advise." ATC's response crackled through. "We've scrambled interceptors. Keep calm, maintain altitude, and avoid evasive maneuvers until F-22s arrive." Jessica nodded to herself, already calculating possibilities. The intruder wasn't reacting to advisories or the appearance of military jets, it was deliberate. She could see it now, a sleek aircraft closing fast, almost taunting the interception teams. Years of experience whispered to her, this wasn't a random threat. This was a calculated, skilled pilot, possibly military trained, testing limits in civilian skis. She glanced at the cabin. Passengers were oblivious, some reclining with eyes closed, others scrolling through phones. Her lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. They would remain blissfully unaware. She tapped the yoke lightly, adjusting speed and altitude with precise finesse. Her mind ran calculations on trajectory, wind shear, fuel efficiency, and escape angles. Every micro-movement ensured passenger safety while subtly guiding the intruder within visual range of the F-22s. Tom finally spoke, voice low. "This is insane. No civilian can fly like that." Jessica didn't answer directly. Instead, she focused on the intruder's patterns, short bursts of speed, sudden climbs, evasive rolls. Only elite pilots could fly like this, pilots trained in maneuvers few civilians even imagined. Her heartbeat remained calm, but her mind raced, running simulations and preparing contingencies in case the intruder attempted a dangerous approach. The F-22 pilots closed the distance rapidly, eyes on Jessica's aircraft. They radioed, "Civilian flight, identify yourself. You're performing maneuvers outside normal flight protocols." Jessica's response was crisp, professional, and intentionally cryptic. "This is Flight 482, maintaining course. Call sign Ghost Rider." Silence erupted in the Raptor cockpits. Ghost Rider. A call sign long retired, a ghost from classified operations. Both pilots froze mid-transmission, disbelief spreading like wildfire. The maneuvers, the calm precision, the timing, it all matched the legends they had only read about in secret records. And now, here she was, a civilian, executing what should have been impossible. Jessica's eyes scanned the instruments once more. The intruder was accelerating toward Chicago airspace, heading dangerously low, aggressive in its approach. Her reflexes kicked in naturally, guiding the plane in subtle, precise adjustments that would keep passengers safe while providing the perfect interception window for the Raptors. To the passengers, it was just minor turbulence. To the military, it was in tactical precision. As the first Raptor closed in, Jessica felt the familiar surge of focus she hadn't experienced in years. She was ready, every calculation, every decision in harmony with instinct and experience. The ordinary flight she had expected was gone, replaced by a complex ballet of speed, skill, and suspense. Somewhere out there, the intruder pilot had no idea they were about to meet a living legend, hidden in plain sight as the most unsuspecting pilot in the sky. The two F-22 Raptors streaked across the sky, their engines roaring with barely contained power. In the cockpit, pilots Lieutenant Mark and Captain Torres struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. The commercial aircraft ahead of them wasn't behaving like any civilian plane. They were performing impossible maneuvers, subtle rolls, precise climbs, and calculated evasions that every training manual they had memorized. "Holy, look at that," Mark muttered under his breath, gripping his controls tightly. Eyes were wide behind her visor. "There's no way that's a commercial jet." Jessica Hale sat calmly in her cockpit, her hands steady on the yoke, her eyes scanning every instrument. The intruder aircraft, which had been testing the restricted airspace boundaries, was now within visual range. Jessica knew that if she miscalculated even slightly, the encounter could escalate into disaster. But her confidence was absolute. Every movement, every micro-adjustment was precise, perfectly balancing passenger safety with tactical control over the situation. Mark keyed his mic, voice tense. "Flight ahead, identify yourself. You are performing maneuvers outside all standard flight protocols." Jessica's response was smooth, deliberate, and cryptic. "Flight 482, commercial pilot, call sign Ghost Rider." Silence filled the Raptor cockpits. Ghost Rider. The name alone sent chills through both pilots. It was a legendary call sign, retired years ago, belonging to one of the most elite fighter pilots in U.S. Air Force history. The stories of Ghost Rider's feats, precision flying, split-second decision-making, impossible interceptions, had circulated in classified channels, and now here she was, piloting a commercial jet. Shook her head in disbelief. "It can't be, she's a civilian." Mark swallowed hard, scanning the movements again. "Those maneuvers, no civilian could do that. No one could." Jessica, unfazed, subtly guided the plane closer to the intruder. Her micro-adjustments were imperceptible to the passengers, who sipped coffee and watched the clouds drift by. Outside, the military pilots tried to follow her movements, struggling to maintain formation. Each adjustment was calculated, executed with military precision, yet hidden behind the veneer of a routine commercial flight. She tapped her headset lightly, issuing minor instructions to ATC, while keeping her attention on the intruder. Its movements were aggressive, calculated, and fast, almost as if it knew the military jets were behind her. Jessica's training kicked in fully, decades of combat experience distilled into instincts. She began subtly nudging her aircraft into optimal positions, leading the intruder toward a safer interception point while keeping her passengers oblivious. The F-22 pilots exchanged tense glances. "She's controlling this," whispered. Mark's voice trembled slightly. "It has to be her, Ghost Rider, the legend." The intruder pilot finally reacted, attempting an evasive maneuver, but Jessica anticipated it instantly. She shifted altitude and trajectory smoothly, guiding the intruder along a controlled path that would allow the Raptors to intercept without endangering the passengers. Her commercial persona masked the combat brilliance that had once dominated classified skis. The Raptors closed in, their supersonic engines roaring, yet Jessica remained serene. Every calculation, speed, angle, timing, flowed naturally, the kind of precision that only a pilot of Ghost Rider's caliber could execute. Mark realized they were witnessing a master at work, blending civilian composure with elite combat skill in a display that was both mesmerizing and humbling. As the intruder's speed increased, Jessica began plotting the next series of maneuvers. She would guide the jet carefully, avoiding abrupt changes that could alarm passengers, while setting up the perfect conditions for the Raptors to safely engage. Her calm exterior hid the storm of activity inside her mind, each calculation executed with flawless timing. Above the clouds, tension crackled in the air like electricity. Ghost Rider had revealed herself, not through violence but through skill. In the skis over Chicago, a commercial pilot had just transformed into a living legend, her call sign echoing in military memory, impossible to forget. And yet, passengers remained blissfully unaware, trusting in her composure. They had no idea that the routine flight they had boarded was now the stage for a high-stakes encounter that would be remembered in classified files for decades to come. Jessica Hale's hands remained steady on the yoke, her eyes scanning the rapidly changing landscape of the sky. The intruder aircraft had accelerated aggressively, its sharp movements aimed to test her limits. To the passengers, it was nothing more than minor turbulence, a gentle wobble that caused a few heads to tilt in curiosity. But inside the cockpit, Jessica's mind was a whirlwind of calculations, predictions, and rapid-fire decisions. Every movement had to be precise, invisible to the passengers yet lethal in its tactical effectiveness. "Altitude check," she muttered softly, though her voice carried the authority of someone entirely in control. Tom, unaware of the gravity of the situation, checking instruments and adjusting his own controls. Jessica noted the intruder's velocity, comparing it with the aircraft's potential limits. Her training resurfaced instinctively. This was no ordinary civilian encounter. She calculated angles, wind resistance, turbulence effects, and the aircraft's exact response to microadjustments. Every action had to maintain passenger safety, while maneuvering strategically to influence the intruder's path. Outside, the two F-22 Raptors struggled to match her precise, controlled movements. Lieutenant Mark and Captain Torres had been tracking her for minutes, their disbelief growing with every maneuver. "She's unbelievable," murmured. "Those adjustments, no civilian should be able to do that." Mark's eyes narrowed. "It's Ghost Rider. The precision, the timing, it matches everything we've read about her in files." The realization hit them. The pilot they were escorting or monitoring was not who they thought she was. She was a legend, operating in civilian disguise, executing maneuvers that could rival any fighter jet. Jessica's focus returned to the intruder. The pilot's movements were calculated, aggressive, almost mocking the Raptors trailing behind. The intruder attempted a sharp climb, aiming to break formation and enter restricted Chicago airspace. Jessica's response was subtle yet flawless. A gentle tilt here, a tiny adjustment in speed there, redirecting the intruder's trajectory without alarming the passengers. She anticipated the next move before it happened, predicting angles and speed based on patterns only a top-tier combat pilot could recognize. Her mind raced through multiple contingencies. Should the intruder attempt a sudden dive, she would adjust altitude by 200 feet. A sudden lateral shift, she would counter with a calculated roll. Each option was pre-accounted for, executed in milliseconds with perfect timing. Tom remained unaware, trusting her silent command, focused only on standard procedures. The passengers, meanwhile, continued with their meals, reading, and conversation, blissfully ignorant of the life-or-death decisions unfolding above the clouds. Mark and adjusted their own approaches, mirroring her subtle corrections, realizing they were not merely intercepting the intruder, they were following Jessica's lead. "She's guiding them," Mark whispered over the radio, awe and disbelief coloring his voice. Nodded, her hands gripping the yoke. The civilian aircraft was orchestrating the encounter with unmatched precision. Every micro-adjustment, every slight altitude shift, and every evasive maneuver was controlled by Ghost Rider herself. The intruder pilot grew increasingly frustrated. It became clear to Jessica that he had underestimated her. Aggressive climbs, sudden dives, and high-speed passes failed to shake her or her aircraft. She anticipated, countered, and redirected, all while maintaining an appearance of ordinary commercial flight. Her mind raced, yet her exterior remained serene, a mask of calm professionalism that hid the storm of skill and experience underneath. Above Chicago, tension crackled invisibly in the skies. Passengers remained safe, oblivious to the high-stakes battle being waged above their heads. The Raptors followed, carefully coordinating with Jessica's invisible lead, preparing for an optimal interception point. Ghost Rider had assumed complete control of the situation, blending civilian composure with elite tactical mastery, a fusion that neither intruder nor military pilots could challenge. In the cockpit, Jessica allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Every calculation was working perfectly. The intruder's aggression had been anticipated, every possible escape or attack vector accounted for. Passenger safety remained intact. And above it all, the legend of Ghost Rider was alive, orchestrating a breathtaking ballet of precision, skill, and calculated risk, a performance invisible to everyone except those trained to recognize its brilliance. The intruder's aggression intensified, but Jessica Hale's composure never wavered. She shifted the plane with near-imperceptible precision, guiding the jet along a calculated path that would allow the Raptors to intercept safely. To the passengers, it was a routine flight, a few bumps in the clouds, nothing unusual. Yet in the cockpit, every movement, every micro-adjustment was the product of years of elite combat training, decades of experience long hidden behind the of a commercial pilot. Lieutenant Mark and Captain Torres, still struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing, finally saw the unmistakable signs. Jessica's hands, steady and confident, controlled the plane with surgical accuracy. Every maneuver, the subtle barrel roll to counter a dive, the precise tilt to adjust for wind shear, the perfect climb to maintain line of sight with the intruder, was executed with unparalleled skill. Both pilots leaned closer to their instruments, eyes widening in disbelief. "She's controlling everything," whispered, her voice trembling. "No civilian could do that." Mark swallowed hard. "It has to be her, Ghost Rider, the legend." Memories flashed in his mind, briefings, old files, and stories whispered in military channels. Ghost Rider, a pilot whose precision had become the stuff of legends, thought to have retired years ago, was alive and orchestrating a high-stakes operation from a commercial cockpit. Jessica noticed the Raptors closing in, their pilots still processing the revelation. She adjusted course subtly, ensuring the intruder remained in position for the military jets while keeping the passengers blissfully unaware. The intruder made another aggressive attempt, diving toward restricted airspace. Jessica anticipated it instantly, countering with a smooth climb and lateral shift that redirected the intruder's trajectory. Her movements were so flawless, so controlled that Mark and exchanged stunned glances. "She's guiding them," Mark breathed. ATC's voice crackled nervously in the background, trying to coordinate with the F-22s and maintain civilian safety. Jessica's calm, professional updates masked the chaos of the situation. She reported minor course adjustments, altitude checks, and turbulence, all entirely normal in civilian terms, yet every word was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Her mind calculated speed, wind resistance, intruder intent, and optimal intercept angles simultaneously. This was no ordinary flight. It was in tactical aviation. The intruder, now visibly frustrated, attempted a sharp climb, banking aggressively. Jessica anticipated it, countering with a series of subtle micro-adjustments that were almost invisible to the eye. Passengers continued reading, chatting, and sipping coffee, unaware that they were witnessing a life-or-death maneuver above their heads. The Raptors mirrored her movements, following her lead, recognizing the genius in her precision. "She's not just flying this plane," said quietly, awe in her tone. "She's orchestrating everything. Every move, every calculation." Mark nodded, eyes wide. "And the passengers don't even know it." The realization hit them fully. The commercial pilot they were observing was Ghost Rider alive, operating above civilian skis and executing maneuvers that had previously only existed in legends and classified files. Jessica felt a small, satisfied smile curve her lips. Recognition by the military pilots wasn't necessary for her plan to succeed, but it was inevitable. Her movements had revealed her, just as she intended, but only to those capable of understanding the full magnitude of her skill. She had transformed from a seemingly ordinary commercial pilot into the living legend she had once been, commanding the skis with expertise and precision. The intruder's frustration grew. It was clear that the pilot had underestimated her. Jessica anticipated every move, every evasive tactic, countering them seamlessly while maintaining absolute passenger safety. The Raptors were now fully synchronized with her strategy, forming an invisible perimeter that kept the intruder on a controlled path. In the skies over Chicago, the legend of Ghost Rider had returned, not with weapons or aggression, but with skill, precision, and calculated brilliance. She was no longer invisible to the world's most elite pilots, yet to the passengers, she remained ordinary, unassuming, and calm, the perfect mask for someone whose true identity was about to astonish those who had dared to forget her. The intruder's aircraft continued its reckless path toward Chicago's restricted airspace. Jessica Hale's eyes narrowed as she assessed the threat. Her passengers remained completely oblivious, some dozing, others flipping through magazines, entirely unaware that the safety of their flight rested in the hands of a legendary pilot they had no reason to fear. Jessica's hands hovered over the controls, micro-adjusting speed and altitude with flawless precision. Every movement was calculated to keep the intruder within visual range for the F-22 Raptors, while ensuring the cabin remained perfectly stable. Tom, unaware of her true identity, followed her instructions dutifully. "We might need to adjust course slightly," he suggested casually, assuming they were just minor air traffic corrections. Jessica smiled faintly, keeping her voice calm. "Affirmative, just minor adjustments, nothing passengers need to notice." Her eyes flicked to the radar. The intruder was accelerating aggressively, diving toward the city below. Jessica quickly calculated potential interception points, factoring in the Raptor's speed, altitude, and positioning. The F-22 pilots were now fully aware of her identity. Lieutenant Mark muttered under his breath, "She's orchestrating this entire scenario. Every move, every adjustment, it's calculated." Captain Torres nodded, disbelief etched across her face. "I've never seen anyone fly like this," she admitted. The intruder had underestimated her. Each aggressive maneuver had been anticipated and countered with invisible precision. Ghost Rider, once thought retired, was commanding the skies again. Jessica's mind raced through contingencies. If the intruder attempted a sudden dive, she would adjust altitude by 300 feet. A lateral acceleration would require a 5-degree roll. Each potential move was accounted for, executed in real time with near-perfect timing. The intruder's aggressive maneuvers were calculated, but Jessica was faster, not in speed alone, but in decision-making, anticipation, and execution. Her mind, honed by years of high-stakes missions, processed dozens of variables simultaneously, while her hands translated them into fluid, invisible corrections. The Raptors mirrored her movements, but even they struggled to keep up. Mark and exchanged glances, realization dawning. The commercial jet was not only evading the intruder but strategically positioning it for safe interception. The precision required to maintain passenger safety while orchestrating military coordination was staggering. Every passenger adjustment in the cabin, every mile above the ground, had been accounted for. Jessica keyed her headset, issuing subtle updates to ATC, adjusting altitude by 200 feet, minor course deviation to 45, passengers stable. Her voice remained calm, professional, masking the intensity of her calculations. In reality, she was funneling the intruder toward a controlled corridor where the F-22s could engage safely. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and catastrophe could occur, but Jessica's skill left no margin for error. The intruder pilot, now visibly frustrated, attempted a sharp climb and dive, aggressive maneuvers designed to break formation. Jessica anticipated both instantly. Her hands moved with ghostly precision, subtle shifts correcting altitude and speed without alarming passengers. The cabin remained smooth, calm, and uneventful. Tom, following her lead, adjusted without understanding the stakes. Outside, the Raptors tightened formation, prepared to intercept, guided by Ghost Rider's invisible hand. Jessica allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. Every calculation was working perfectly. The intruder was contained, the Raptors in position, and passengers safe. Ghost Rider had assumed total control, blending civilian calm with elite military precision, orchestrating a ballet that only someone of her skill could perform. Above the city, tension crackled invisibly, a high-stakes operation unfolding silently, perfectly, and flawlessly. In that moment, she wasn't just a commercial pilot. She was Ghost Rider, alive and commanding the skis, executing maneuvers so precise they could only have been performed by a legend, and doing it all while the world below remained blissfully unaware. The intruder's aggressive maneuvers were escalating. Sharp dives, sudden climbs, and high-speed rolls tested every limit, yet Jessica Hale remained composed, her hands guiding the commercial jet with fluid precision. Passengers sipped coffee, typed on laptops, or napped, completely unaware that above their heads, a life-or-death ballet was unfolding. Every movement she made was calculated to keep the intruder contained while positioning it perfectly for the F-22 Raptors to intercept safely. Lieutenant Mark and Captain Torres followed Jessica's lead, awed by her mastery. "She's controlling everything," Mark whispered, gripping the controls of his Raptor. "Every micro-adjustment, every minor tilt, it's orchestrated." Nodded, unable to hide the disbelief in her eyes. The civilian plane they were escorting was performing at a level no fighter jet pilot could match without years of elite training. Jessica anticipated the intruder's next move. A sudden climb toward restricted airspace was imminent. With near-invisible adjustments she countered, slight altitude changes, subtle banking, speed modulation, guiding the intruder into a controlled corridor. Outside, the Raptors mirrored her movements, positioning themselves perfectly for an intercept. The intruder pilot's frustration was evident now. Every aggressive attempt was neutralized before it could escalate. Ghost Rider had calculated every possible vector, every potential escape, every tactical option, and had eliminated them all without alarming the passengers. Tom, her co-pilot, noticed the unusual precision, but assumed it was just Jessica's exceptional piloting skills. "Flight 482 is handling beautifully," he commented casually. "Smooth as ever." Jessica allowed herself a small smile. The passengers remained blissfully unaware, their safety intact. The illusion of an ordinary flight masked an extraordinary operation occurring above the clouds, orchestrated by one of the most skilled pilots in military history. The intruder attempted one final aggressive maneuver, a sharp bank and dive aimed at breaking free from Jessica's invisible control. She anticipated it instantly, countering with precise altitude and heading adjustments, guiding the aircraft toward the optimal interception point. The F-22s converged, surrounding the intruder on all sides. The pilots inside the Raptors executed the intercept flawlessly, following the invisible choreography that Ghost Rider had designed. The threat was neutralized without a single shot fired, without alarming a single passenger. As the intruder was escorted safely away from civilian airspace, Jessica leveled the commercial jet and resumed her original course. Passengers noticed only minor turbulence, completely unaware of the high-stakes drama that had just unfolded. She spoke over the intercom with her usual calm demeanor. "Ladies, we've encountered some turbulence. We apologize for the brief bump and thank you for your patience." Polite smiles and nods were the only acknowledgement she received. Mark, and still tracking the flight from their Raptors, exchanged stunned glances. "I can't believe what we just saw," said quietly. She's Ghost Rider." Mark shook his head. "It's impossible. A civilian commanding everything flawlessly, neutralizing the threat without anyone realizing it." Their admiration was tinged with disbelief and awe. In their eyes, Jessica Hale was no longer merely a pilot. They had witnessed a living legend at work. Jessica logged the flight as routine, masking adrenaline, tension, and the satisfaction of a mission flawlessly executed. She guided the plane into a smooth descent toward Chicago, her calm exterior unchanged, her secret identity intact. To the passengers, the day had been ordinary. To the military, the return of Ghost Rider had just been witnessed, in skill, control, and tactical brilliance. As the wheels touched the runway, applause broke out in the cabin. Passengers smiled, unaware of how extraordinary the flight had been. Jessica returned their smiles, courteous and composed, hiding the exhilaration beneath her professional demeanor. Above, in the skis and in classified channels, Ghost Rider's legend had grown stronger. A tale of unmatched skill, calm under pressure, and heroic precision. executed invisibly, flawlessly, and spectacularly. The plane touched down smoothly at Chicago, our international airport. Jessica Hale guided it onto the taxiway with the same calm precision she had maintained throughout the entire flight. Passengers applauded politely, some stretching after the journey, completely unaware of the extraordinary events that had just unfolded above the city. To them, it had been a routine flight, a minor bump in the clouds, nothing more. They had no idea that the legend of Ghost Rider had flown among them, invisible yet in full command of the skis. Jessica's hands moved with casual efficiency as she taxied to the gate. Tom glanced at her with a grin, complimenting her on a perfectly smooth flight. Jessica returned the smile, masking the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Just another day," she said softly, her voice calm, professional, and utterly convincing. The passengers began disembarking, chatting happily, none the wiser that they had been shielded from an imminent threat by one of the most skilled pilots in military history. Meanwhile, above the city, the F-22 pilots were still processing what had just occurred. Lieutenant Mark and Captain Torres remained in their cockpits for a few moments, eyes fixed on the retreating intruder aircraft. "She's incredible," Mark said, voice hushed, almost reverent. "I've seen top-tier pilots, but this is beyond anything I've ever witnessed." Nodded, shaking her head. A civilian orchestrating an intercept, neutralizing the threat and keeping passengers completely unaware. Impossible, yet it had happened. Ghost Rider had returned and her skill had not diminished. Back on the ground, military brass began reviewing radar data and flight logs. The maneuvers Jessica had executed were flawless, tactical, and precise. Analysts noted the subtle coordination with the Raptors, the anticipatory adjustments to the intruders' movements, and the seamless protection of civilian passengers. Slowly, the name Ghost Rider began circulating in classified channels once more, whispered among top-ranking officers and pilots. She had reappeared unannounced, undetected, yet unmistakably present in the skis. Jessica completed her post-flight checks with her usual professionalism. Every control, every system was, every report filed. Yet behind the mask of ordinary procedure, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She had maintained her secret identity while executing a mission that could have made headlines worldwide, if anyone outside military and air traffic channels had known. Ghost Rider's legend had endured, strengthened, and now extended into civilian skis, a perfect demonstration of skill, courage, and discretion. As she walked through the terminal, she passed passengers smiling and chatting, still oblivious to the danger they had narrowly avoided. Mothers carried children, businessmen hurried to meetings, travelers discussed plans for the weekend. Ghost Rider had protected them all without fanfare, without recognition, and without ever revealing her true identity. She had saved lives in a manner only she could orchestrate, precisely, invisibly, and flawlessly. Later that evening, back at her small apartment, Jessica reviewed the radar footage in private. Each maneuver, each calculated adjustment, each subtle nudge of her controls replayed perfectly. She allowed herself a faint smile. Ghost Rider was alive, her skill intact and her legacy secure. Civilian life would continue, but the world had witnessed, even if in secret, the return of a true legend. And somewhere in the classified corners of the U.S. Air Force, officers discussed the pilot who had flown a commercial airliner like a fighter jet, who had neutralized a threat without anyone noticing, and who had reminded everyone that heroes sometimes hide in plain sight. Jessica Hale, commercial pilot, seemed ordinary, but Ghost Rider's legend would never fade. She had returned to the skis and, in doing so, had ensured her name would endure in whispers, logs, and memories for generations to come. Above Chicago, the sun set on a day that had begun routinely and ended extraordinarily. Passengers went home, military pilots debriefed in awe, and Jessica Hale prepared for another ordinary flight. Ghost Rider's legacy was secure. Invisible, untouchable, and unmatched, she remained a silent guardian, a master of the skis whose legend would never die.